Great. Thank you, everybody. So welcome, everybody. I'm so very pleased to see such continued interest in this topic. We're here today to discuss some of BRAC's work. So as you know, BRAC is the largest NGO in the world, and it's doing some important work complementing the government of Bangladesh's efforts, supporting the livelihoods and strengthening resilience of a very vulnerable population. BRAC's Ultra-Poor Graduation program is one of the major interventions in this effort. So I know most of you watching online now, as well as those maybe watching after the event on YouTube, will likely be familiar with BRAC's Ultra-Poor Graduation program in Bangladesh. It is very famous, and its approach has been copied across the globe in more than 50 countries. So you could be forgiven for thinking, well, I know all about this approach in Bangladesh, what is new? And that's exactly the focus of this webinar. What's great about BRAC is that there is always something new. Never do they stop and say, well, this program is perfect now, there's nothing more we need to do. They take an approach of continuous improvement. So this webinar will look at these improvements, the adaptations it's made, especially recently in response to COVID. And this is a really important issue right now. COVID-19 related restrictions have affected livelihoods of millions of people in Bangladesh, hitting hard the poor informal sector workers, and the vulnerable non-poor people living just above the poverty line. A survey found an additional 14.8% of the population were living below the poverty line in March in 2021, adding to an existing 20.5%. And this 14.8% are referred to as the new poor. And BRAC is now intentionally incorporating this new group. So the webinar is also going to touch on some recent evaluation work done by LSE and the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development. They've examined the experience of the 2007 cohort to look at their resilience. When graduation programs have been introduced across the world and then evaluated soon after, the participants are normally doing quite well, but you'll often hear people say, well, I mean, of course they're doing well. This isn't surprising. They've just received a lot of support. How well will they do after they're hit by a few more shocks? And it is a valid question, and something that this evaluation sheds some light on, given everybody's just been hit by a massive shock. And so it gives a realistic picture of what the program can and what the limitations are around what it can and can't do, at least in its current form. So the webinar is organised by the Social Protection for Employment community, SPEC, along with socialprotection.org and BRAC, obviously. It's the second webinar organised on the effectiveness of the graduation approach in the face of a large shock like COVID-19, following the webinar that was held on the Honduras graduation program. As most of you know by now, the SPEC is an online community on linking social protection to employment, which operates within the socialprotection.org platform, and it's supported by the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and German GIZ. You are welcome, obviously, to join this community, and you can access then over 200 publications and webinar records on linking social protection to employment, and details will be provided on this at the end. Now to our very impressive panel. First up, we have our keynote speaker, Rosina Haque. She's the program head of BRAC's Ultra-Poor Graduation program and provides its strategic direction. And you can read more about Rosina at the moment on the screen. Rosina and I spent a couple of weeks together a few years ago doing a review of the program, and I can personally attest to the commitment and the passion that, that Rosina brings to her work. So welcome, Rosina. On the panel, we have a number of people. Firstly, we have Mohammed Muklesh Raman Shaka. Apologies for any pronunciation mistake there. Mr. Shaka is the Joint Secretary for the Ministry of Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives for the Government of Bangladesh. Mr. Shaka has deep experience and knowledge in the fields of poverty eradication and inclusive growth. He's also the National Project Director of a transfer program for poor rural women called Strengthening Women's Ability for Productive New Opportunities Project. So welcome, Mr. Shaka. Next, we have Dr. Imran Martin. Imran is currently the Executive Director of BRAC Institute of Governance and Development that I mentioned earlier. It's the Research and Postgraduate Education Institute at BRAC University. He has strong development background and has held positions in a number of organizations, including Innovations for Poverty Action. Welcome, Dr. Martin. And last but not least is Palash Das. Palash is the Director of the Ultra-Poor Graduation Program for BRAC. Palash brings strong experience in the fields of sustainable and inclusive development, international relations, gender equality and diversity, and general management in the nonprofit sector. He brings valuable experience from his time at UN Women, UNDP, and Oxfam. And I am your moderator for today. My name is Lisa Hannigan. I work at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia, and I'm the director of the social protection section and a social protection specialist. I've been working on social protection for many years and have done quite a bit of work in Bangladesh over those years. Okay, so that's enough from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Rosina to deliver her presentation. As she is doing that, feel free to put any questions you'd like into the Q&A box, not the chat box. Again, that's put the questions into the Q&A box. When she's finished, I've got some of my own questions to pose to her and the panelists, but I would love to include some of yours, obviously, also. Just to let you know, given the topic and the panel that we have been able to assemble, my questions are going to fall into three areas. The first is the research that has been done on the sustainability of the approach. The second is how the program fits with government social protection efforts. And the third is the program adaptations and new programs that BRAC has introduced to deal with COVID. So I will loosely structure the Q&A into these areas, but please do ask any questions you would like outside of those if you have them. So over to you, Rosina. Thank you very much.
Sorry, allow me some time to project the presentation. Sorry, I can't see myself when I'm presenting. So is there anyone who can project this on behalf of me? Great. Sorry for the trouble. Thank you, Lisa. And I would like to welcome once again all the honorable panelists and the wonderful audience who joined this webinar. As Lisa mentioned that I'm delighted to share the experience and evidence of BRAC Ultra-Poor Graduation Program Adaptability and building resilience, especially in response to any shocks like COVID-19. Hope the insights from this presentation will create a room for further discussion on the scope of work to address the multidimensional needs of the extreme poor population and create a sustainable pathway out of poverty through a collaborative approach. Next. Before stepping into the overall graduation approach, let's put some light on BRAC, which itself is a development success story, spreading solutions born in Bangladesh and creating the opportunity the world's poor. We started as a relief operation in 1972, and then been the forefront of the poverty alleviation, disaster recovery, health, education, microfinance, and many development sectors, and thus turned as one of the largest Southern NGO in the world. Since its inception, we actually covered over 100 million population in Bangladesh and 11 other countries. So we also believe sustainability and the skills. That's why we develop concept first and then test and then adopts the best practices. And this is how BRAC become a solution ecosystem that creates opportunities for the people to realize and unlock their potential. Although since its inception, it has been a pioneer and the catalyst for change in a struggle with the poverty. But in the late 90s, we have realized that the existing poverty elimination programs are not adequately reaching the people who are experiencing the worst form of poverty. In fact, sometimes it was also observed that they are bypassed from any conventional microfinance or any other development programs because they are considered as high credit risk group, and even they are invisible within their community and can't access government services or any other services, and often termed as the ultra poor and considered as the subset of the extreme poor population. Through this realization, as soon as we realized, and if we look at the characteristics, please go to the next slide. If we look at the characteristics of this segment of population for the ultra poor, then we can see that they are not only chronically food insecure, and they are not only they don't have only the problem of poor health or lack of access to basic services or education, but also they lack the social capital and simultaneously face the social stigma, and they have little land or sometimes no land or less productive assets, and also disconnected from the markets as well. And disproportionately, there are more female-headed households, and they have a unique set of challenges and the needs. So as soon as we realize this fact, BRAC in fact started to, when we realized that the traditional program are unable to reach the multidimensional, multifaceted needs of this population, then BRAC started to redesign a program, in fact, design a program and through a holistic interventions, and pioneered the graduation approach in 2003 in Bangladesh through launching a program which is currently known as Ultra-Poor Graduation Program. And since its inception from the 2002 till December 2020, the program already served more than 2.1 million underpoor households of 48 districts in Bangladesh. Definitely, we will talk about the adaptability and the evidence of this program, but quickly, just before that, quickly run through what the uniqueness of this approach, why is so successful. So if we see the uniqueness of this approach, then we can see that it's a comprehensive, and it's also a time bound and integrated, and the interventions are also sequenced, which enable ultra-poor households to achieve sustainable livelihoods and create a pathway out of extreme poverty. And these graduation approach is not a silver bullet to solve any problems. Rather, it highly contextualized and highly adaptive, targeted to vulnerable populations, and it also ensures post program linkages, which is really important for the longer term sustainability. And it also, during the program, closely monitor and measure the progresses. Following the BRAC's principle, as I mentioned in my first slide, that we also, this innovative graduation approach also piloted first, and then the continuous fine tune and iteration happen, and then we scale up to bring the positive impact. So this is the uniqueness, I would say, that about the graduation approach. In Bangladesh, if we look at this diagram, then we can see that how the Ultra-Poor graduation program is implementing in Bangladesh through this model. As we can see that it starts from targeting, followed by some program intervention using some pillars to achieve the expected result, which is graduation. Targeting methodology starts, back to the old slide. Yeah, thank you. Targeting methodology starts starts with the geographical targeting, which includes participatory rural appraisal method or focus group discussion in a specific area, where actually we try to find out the bottom group of peoples, and then bottom of group of peoples actually carried out through a detailed questionnaire has carried out for them to know their socioeconomic status and select them primarily based on some set of pre-indicators. And then 100% verification takes place by the mid-level managers to the verification. This is all about the targeting. And if we look at the pillars, these pillars, groundbreaking pillars, actually we say that based on the different context, the intervention is varied based under these pillars, but we try to ensure that these pillars are included in any graduation programs. So if we look at the first pillar, livelihood promotion, it includes asset transfer or cash transfer or loan to procure a viable package of assets such as cow, goat, sheep, agriculture, small business, etc. Along with the technical skills to run the enterprise effectively. And also we provide some inputs for the enterprises and also facilitated the markets between the participants and the local traders. If we look at the financial inclusion, in fact, it provides or it allows participants to direct access to the conventional or formal microfinance services where they also save, and it's also accompanied by the financial literacy to promote the positive and secure financial products. If we look at the social protection, it covers both. In fact, it covers preventive, protective, and promotive measures too. And because it provides the assistance to those who actually deprive from the poverty, and also who lack access to the healthcare services and education. It also, these pillars also tries to cover them to enroll into those sectors. And definitely access to government safety net programs and linkage with the other wraparound services is crucial under this social protection program. And here the last pillar, so the social empowerment, which is we all, in fact consider this as the cornerstone of the pillar, because it really leverages the regular check-ins with the participants and also provide the confidence building, life skill support by the program staff under this pillar. So this is really crucial as it really helps to build the confidence and resilience of the participants by the program staff. And it also promotes the social inclusion, as we have seen that when they enroll into the program, they are socially disconnected. So this pillar also promotes the social inclusion. That's why actually this is an important pillar. So through these through 24-month cycles in Bangladesh, through these pillars, actually our Ultra-Poor participants try to achieve a sustainable socioeconomic resilience, which include increased assets, access to market and services, and the social capital, and also increased diversified livelihood. And also it ensures the improved food security, access to financial services, and also promote the positive behavioral changes. So this is all about the overall graduation approach in Bangladesh. Next. Graduation is till now, I have talked about the overall graduation approach and how it's operating in Bangladesh. Now, I would like to focus more on the evidence, which is one of the objective of this webinar. This graduation is the most evidence-backed program to date, I would say, to my best knowledge, in fact. To check the resilience and the sustainability of participants, BIGD and London School of Economics actually conducted a rigorous randomized control trial on the cohort of 2007 participants. And this study had a 5-round survey, which is started from 2007 till 2018. While we analyzing the impact of the participants, even after the 7 years joining in the program, we see that even after the 7 years of the program intervention, participants on an upward trajectory out of poverty. They achieved some remarkable achievements in some indicators, like as we can see, that 37% increase in annual earnings, 10% increase in consumption spending, 9-fold increase in savings, and 2-fold increase in land access, which is considered as most important indicator for the ultra-poor segment of population. Other outcome areas are significant increase in work productivity and household access to more stable and secure employment, reduction in income inequality, which is the most important thing, I would say, and then definitely build resilience and enables after recovery from shocks. In fact, to my best knowledge, it is the largest RCT conducted so far, and which is continued later by the London of Economics, even after the 10 years of the program cycle. And they not only look at the impact of the program after the 10 years, but also they try to find out the questions, what factors, what are the reasons which actually helps these people to escape from the poverty trap. And the results showed that a big push in respective of the asset is really help them to escape from the poverty. When the people join in the program, we know that ultra-poor are heterogeneous, so they join with their heterogeneity, and that's why the impact, there is a heterogenetic impact as well. So we have seen that a relatively who joined the program below the threshold level of the assets, they actually need a larger size of assets to escape from the poverty. And another findings showed that one of this approach is one of the cost effective approach, as the benefit is larger than the cost. If we invest $1, then the benefit is returned as like $3.21. And as I have mentioned, just that there is the heterogenetic impact, then the study also showed that the program has a strong impact in the younger people compared to the oldest population. So this is the findings, RCT findings, which conducted from 2007 to 2018. And now if we, in fact, look at the global adaptation, then what we can see, that inspired by the results of Bangladesh, CGAP and Ford Foundation in 2006 piloted graduation approach in 8 countries through 10 projects. And this approach has gained worldwide recognition, and as a result, it has been adopted by governments, BRAC, and other NGOs, development partners in nearly 50 countries through more than 100 projects, and reached approximately 14 million individuals till that. A randomized control trial also conducted in the 6 countries, which is, we can see here that Ethiopia, Ghana, Honduras, India, Pakistan, and Peru. And that also shows the positive impact, and that also evident that this program not only works in Bangladesh, but also worked in other countries too. And because if we see the result, then we can see that there is a positive, in fact, outcome in the most important indicator, like significant increase in income, self-employment, savings, consumption welfare, psychological well-being as well. Next. Till now, what we have seen that definitely this program is an adaptive program, and there is a lot of evidence which also shows that this program really build the resilience among the ultra-poor household. But now the question is, does graduation approach build resilience to cope with the pandemic? To answer this question, in fact, there was another study conducted by LSE, Yes, the next slide, please. Another study conducted by LSE and BIGD on the 2017 cohort who successfully escaped the poverty threshold. Um, uh, uh, and we found that more likely the people who actually beyond the threshold level, they are more likely to have good jobs, including salaried, agricultural and non-agricultural work, and productive assets at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And not only the beginning of the COVID-19, but also they are more likely to keep this good job during the pandemic too, as they are able to use their technical knowledge, how to deal with the critical situation, and also how to utilize their savings and other things. So that's why actually we found that more likely they are keeping their good jobs. And the same thing what I have said in my earlier slides, that there is a impact in heterogeneity impact among the participants. So that's why we found that's also actually proved here through this study that if they are younger, then they are able to continue the keep good jobs compared to the older participants. And when the overall world actually facing and experiencing the agony of COVID-19 induced migration, that time we found that this group of people actually continued their job and less migration happened in their case. So this is also the reasons what I have just mentioned, that they use their technical knowledge, they build the confidence what actually build among them. That's also helped them to cope up with this crisis. And as well as their savings practices, savings behavior also actually helped to accumulate to use that accumulated savings to keep this to address this crisis. Next, please. Yes, till now we have, in fact, in my presentation several times I talked about the adaptation, and now we can see some examples of how this program is adaptive in different contexts, targeted population and sudden shocks. When we designed the program, then we considered the different context, the rural, urban, hour, and climate vulnerabilities. For example, currently we are operating in 39 districts, including rural, urban, and also we are in Howard, and there are some climate vulnerable areas as well, where the enterprises options, the housing infrastructure, and the follow-up mechanism, these things are also various context to context. And this is also not only focus the targets, but also cater context, but also cater the needs of the targeted population. For instance, persons with disabilities, indigenous community, and some emerging group or fragile community, which actually arise due to the disaster, sudden shock, and the conflicts. And as we have seen that the Ultra-Poor Graduation program is also the shock responsive too. So it is definitely adaptable based on the different shocks like disaster and pandemic. Next slide, please. So as we are talking about the adaptation, let's take an example of COVID-19, which we just experienced, and still we are going through this situation. So how we adapt this model in Bangladesh responding to this shock. First case in Bangladesh identified in March 2020. And by this time, actually, we have seen that there are several general holiday followed by lockdown. And that's impacted some sectors like education, health, and as well as the economy of the Bangladesh. So, and to address these things, BRAC, other government, BRAC, and other NGOs also, spreading the knowledge and also distributing hygiene materials and addressing situation in different way. So we as a program also had to adapt with this situation, especially considering the COVID-19 context in mind. In fact, when we adapted this model, we kept two broader things in our mind. First, aligning this with the COVID-19 context, like social distancing is one of the important thing for COVID-19. So this is one. And then another one, we tried to in fact, we kept the principles intact, and without compromising the quality, we did this adaptation. If you look at the slide, you can see that first when we customize the program operation, we try to look at the activities where social gatherings usually take places, like targeting. So we tried to adopt this model with the lesson crowd and with the alternative, like instead of conducting participatory rural appraisal, we actually did the focus group discussion with some limited people. And I also want to reinforce the message again that without compromising the quality and principles and keeping the intact the principles. And also we changed the classroom enterprise training modality, and also in fact try to scatter the services and make the services more doorsteps at their participants house to ensure their protection. And along with the customize the operational modality, we also try to develop some mechanism and incorporate some coping mechanism at the household level, so that you can say in that way that we actually tried to participants make ready to deal this situation. How we did that? First of all, as this situation is a very much unknown to all of us, so the participants as well as the community doesn't have that much knowledge on that. So first we started to provide awareness on health hygiene, followed by the facilitation the vaccination vaccination campaign, yes. And then the most important things under this coping strategy, what we have tried to do, that we tried to create an alternative livelihood, alternative income generating activities at the household level. For example, we provided vegetable seeds to for their homestead gardening, so that they can consume that food during the crisis, and which can also actually meet their dietary requirements as well as nutritional aspect. And also they can sell the surplus if they have to earn the short-term income generating activities. So we also focused more on a small number of poultry or chicken rearing, for which also can meet their dietary requirements, as well as they can sell the chicken and eggs during the pandemic. So we focus more on to create the alternative livelihood options. And during such crisis, in fact, resource mobilization is we found that the crucial things. And resource mobilization from the different corner as per their needs, actually we focus on that. And definitely access to information, because participants need the information like about their enterprises, how they will deal with the perishable items when market is closed, how they will sell their bulls when market is limited, and the other information like now the vaccination has started, where they will register, how they will register. So all these access to we facilitated this information to the participants as well. Next slide, please. Yes, and we also found that strengthen coordination with different stakeholders is the crucial, especially the community, because when we are not able to reach the community, but the community participants live within their community. So if we can strengthen the community with the information and other support, then definitely is going to work for the participants. So we focus on that. We strengthen the committees, and also we strengthen the coordination with the local government, because at that time some stimulus packages announced from the government, and also the community and other stakeholders. So we strengthen the coordinations so that these village the village committees and also the participants can avail the services. And as regular linkages with social safety net programs were in our focus even during that pandemic, where and are. And during that time, in fact, when we face the barriers to reach them physically, then we actually increase the use of digital services. We introduce mobile financial services to participants, so that they can receive the stimulus packages from different stakeholders, and also they can continue their savings through using that mobile financial services, which is really important. And it's also proved again during these shocks that how that helps the participants to cope up with such situation. And also through that digital platform, we continued the seamless communication with the participants and program staff to equip them with different knowledge. Lastly, I would like to say that despite of the different change in modality, the resource mobilization and strengthening community, what is the most important thing is equip your staff first. So if the staff is equipped enough, then they can implement the customized model. So if the first thing is important, that to change their mindset, to serve these people, to change their mindset to serve within this pandemic when their situation is also vulnerable, and change their mindset to ensure the proper safety measures for them, to ensure the proper training for them, and boost up their confidence through frequent communication with them from the different management level. And also, we actually equip them through the facilitation of different orientation training, and as I mentioned, that awareness on health, hygiene, and ensure safety measure was crucial that time. Next, please. What I was talking about, that this was the scenario of the adaptation of the existing program, what we are already implementing. But we have also found that due to this pandemic, a new group has emerged, which was just called as new poor. And as per the World Bank, actually, this group of people was slightly above the upper poverty line, who were the non-poor, and they actually had fallen back and slide back to the poverty due to this pandemic, because they lost their jobs, they depleted their savings, they depleted their assets, and they survived somehow by borrowing money from their neighbors and their relatives. And most of the people who lives in the cities actually had to migrate in their village, and we called them as a reverse migrants. And this scenario is also applicable for the people who live within the village and also face the same crisis. And there was a third round of study, which is conducted by PPRC and BIGD, and they also found that a significant percentage, which was the 9 months back, it was 21.2, but it still is 14.8%. This significant percentage of population is still, didn't gain the steady income, so they are still suffering and they need some support. If we look at where they need support and how the new program actually help these people, to go to the next slide, please. To address this situation, what I'm talking about, the Newport their characteristics and their current challenges. If we talk more about their current challenges, then they are actually not getting access to the finance, because they lack the social capital in their village, who actually migrate from the cities to their village. And also they don't have the steady income or steady business, so they don't meet the criteria to be eligible to get the access from microfinance, and they don't have any collateral or guarantor over there. So that's why they are suffering there. So to address this need, actually, BRAC designed a program for the Newport population, which is called the Newport program, where through that program, actually, we actually trying to create access for them to the microfinance, savings and other for loans, savings and other financial products. And we also have seen that they don't know what to do. Even they get the access to the the loan, they don't know what to do and where should invest the money, and whether they will stay over there, or again they will come back to different cities or go back to different cities. So to do that, actually, our staff, actually, to address this problem, our staff consulted with the participants and developed the business plan, and during the develop the business plan, and also provide the technical knowledge to run their enterprises and business, which is the monthly check-in points. And during develop the business plan, we also considered that diversification is diversification by investing the loans in multiple income generating activities. If we see the research during the pandemic, we can see that the agricultural sector is comparatively less affected than the other sectors. So when we try to develop the business plan, we try to make the combination of the farm and non-farm activities, so that as still pandemic is continuing, they can survive by the one or another enterprises options. And also the one important thing I would like to spot on, that during the business plan or through this Newport program, we try to address both men and women. And I mean, this is a household approach. We develop the enterprise in a way so that men and women both can be engaged with this program. So these are the overall intervention what we have planned under the new program, which is based at the Ultra-Poor Graduation program, but it's not the Ultra-Poor customization of the Ultra-Poor programs. It's completely the new program, dealing with the principles of livelihoods and based on their needs. So our plan is 2021 to target 80,000 new poor participants in 35 districts. We already reached this target, and yes, that's happy to share with all of you. Next slide, please. As I said that the adaptation happened in Bangladesh. So this kind of adaptation is also, as I have said in my earlier slides, that this program is adapted in different countries through BRAC International and by other development practitioners. We have an Ultra-Poor Graduation initiative who also provided some technical assistance to other countries' graduation program. So they also followed some these adaptation techniques, and they also did the list where they focused on, like they also adjust the delivery of assets, what we have adjusted here, and also they also focused on the diversification of the livelihoods in different contexts. And yes, it also found in this crisis that the coaches, the mentors, the program staffs really played a crucial role in terms of providing mental health, mental and emotional support to the participants. And they also link them with the immediate response. I mean, acting health insurance, activate the health insurance, and also identifying nearest health clinics if they need any support in terms of COVID symptoms or any other general illness what they feel. And coordination with local governments for resource mobilization also in the focused areas while they're adopting this model. And the same thing, utilization digital platform. In fact, it's found in most probably Philippines that I'm sorry if it's not Philippines, that electronic check-ins with coach, awareness on health hygiene, understanding symptoms for medical attention. So these actually help participants to graduate out of poverty. I think it's 71, yes, it's in Philippines, 71 participants graduated through innovations in digital and remote coaching strategies even during the pandemic. And definitely, lastly, finally, staff are mobilized to support COVID response and prevention. Next slide, please. Yes, based on the effectiveness, the graduation approach got recognition in the 7th five-year plan and in the National Social Security Strategy in Bangladesh, and inclusive growth and also focused in the 8th five-year plan as well. It also got the worldwide recognition. And based on the experience, evidence, and recognition, the government and many other like-minded organizations are also implementing similar livelihood and financial programs inspired by BRAC's graduation approach. Till now, we have talked about multiple aspects of graduation approach, but if we think beyond as a next step to achieve the agenda of SDG by 2030, a few things need to be considered for sure. First of all, if I look at the first one, then I can see that to contribute directly to poverty reduction for achieving equitable and inclusive growth, it is high time to embed graduation approach in the National Development Plan and social protection programs. Evidence are available, and now the partnership is required for scaling it up. Graduation approach is an evidence-based model we know, and that works. So empowering people to escape poverty is possible, but we cannot do it alone. It needs to be scaled up by the government, while stakeholders must work together and commit significantly more resources. Integrating an scalable graduation approach into government's existing social and economic programs and policies can make them more impactful, sustainable, and effective. And if we look at the second box, like then we can see that a big push that can help people to escape from the poverty trap, and it's also evident from the research as well. The research also shows that once people reach a specific threshold in the value of their assets, they stay out of poverty. If people receive transfer that are too small or incremental, they may improve their consumption, but will not have the resources to cross the extreme poverty threshold. And lastly, the graduation approach can complement the existing programs and build on the systems and resources governments have already put in place. In addition to that, it can also improve the targeting process and make social protections more, oh, my video is off. Yes, more inclusive assets such as persons with disabilities, indigenous communities, and can also adapt it in complex settings, marginalized and for vulnerable groups. So yes, and definitely we are going to talk more on these slides in our next discussions in the Q&A sessions, and definitely we will hear more from our honorable panelists. The next slide, please. As a legacy of our founder, Abed Bhai, we believe that if we can unlock the potential of the people, then they can be the agent of their own change in their or transform their lives. Let's conclude the presentation with this belief. And thank you so much once again for all the listeners listen this presentation till end, and definitely looking forward to the questions to answer. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Rosina. And that was just a lovely way to conclude. A very comprehensive presentation. You put a lot there into half an hour. I'm going to give you a little rest just for a little while I think I'll start posing the questions to the panelists, but I definitely will bring you in shortly, so stay on the line. We've had a few questions come in, which I think add nicely to some that I also was going to ask and fit neatly within the areas of better understanding some of the aspects of the research that's been done, how the program fits with government's own social protection efforts, and also some of the program adaptations and the new program that has been created to help deal with COVID. So let's then maybe start. So we'll talk about the recent research, the LSE, BIGD research shortly. But just to start, I have a broader question to Imran, maybe just to set the scene. Imran obviously has led many studies on poverty and other development issues, including the graduation approach. Since last year, BIGD has also conducted a few studies on COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the life and livelihoods of people in Bangladesh. So the question then is, what does the evidence suggest priority areas of focus should be to ensure that both the extreme poor as well as the new poor can have, I guess, less precarious existences? Over to you, Imran.
Thank you so much, and thanks Rosina for a very comprehensive presentation. Every time I also, though I'm just a stone throw away from BRAC, every time I sort of learn so much, because this program is always evolving and in very interesting ways. And thanks for that. Okay, so just a few thoughts in terms of the question that you basically raised. What do we learn from the ultra-poor graduation evidence in terms of dealing and building greater resilience around COVID-19, against COVID-19 shock? So I think a few thoughts here. So firstly, I think it's very clear that the ultra-poor graduation model builds resilience. On average, it builds resilience against COVID shocks, right? So we basically see that. But it also builds resilience only in cases where the program has been able to, or the program members have been able to really benefit from the program much more, right? So I think the main thing is that those who have benefited from the ultra-poor graduation program manage to keep their benefit, manage to be resilient against shock in terms of, you know, lower risk of erosion of those benefits compared to those who are not in the program, right? So I think that is really the key message. So the main, I think, challenge is how do we increase the chances of you know, the ultra-poor graduation, more secure graduation to happen, right? And by secure graduation, what we see in from the COVID case, that is an interplay of two things, right? So there's a crossing of the asset threshold that needs to happen, right, over time. And secondly, there has to be occupational transformation that needs to happen. This whole good job point is an occupational shift that's happening from casual labor, right, to self-employment or other forms of slightly more secure wage employment, right? So both of these need to happen. The interaction of these two actually creates the resilience. So the main, I think, challenge is how do we basically, you know, kind of create that type of, you know, maximize that. And I think there are two things here, right? So one is the big push. It's absolutely clear that we need to maximize the big push even more. And that basically means that, you know, within the cost envelope of the program, we need to see, you know, what are the other areas where cost optimization can be done, where the greater efficiency can be, you know, realized, so that resources can be released to create a big push that I think would be very, very critical. So I think, you know, how do we create a big push, a big push, I think is really, really important within the resource envelope, right? And I think experimentation and adaptation of the program there, I think, is going to be very important. The second, I think we have slightly less evidence on this, but I think our intuition from programmatic experience is very, very clear that the coaching and mentoring part of the program, the hand-holding, what we call hand-holding or coaching and mentoring, is extremely critical in terms of creating, you know, the kind of threshold crossing that we basically see, right? Because it is, the threshold crossing is not only because of the asset transfer, it's also the management of the asset, right? It's also, you know, how you manage, and that management is about aspiration, right? So the coaching and mentoring part is extremely important, right? Now we also know that there's a lot of variation in that coaching and mentoring. So reducing the variation of the coaching and mentoring and making it more efficient, because it is a very, very, you know, after asset transfer, that actually remains to be, you know, the most important cost category. I think that's going to be really, really important. That's the kind of second thing. How do we create, lower the variation, right, in terms of program delivery, right? Primarily, you know, with the coaching, mentoring, there are variations with respect to the staff quality and so on and so forth. How do you use technology to reduce that variation? That, I think, can also have an important impact, both in terms of cost reduction, but also in terms of, you know, the kind of higher quality of the mentoring and coaching that can be imparted. The third is, how do we impart, you know, new skills? I think this is really, really important. This is where the occupational transformation part becomes really important, right? How do people move from, you know, casual wage labor to self-employment, to other forms of more secure wage labor? And that is about skills. So the skills agenda needs to be taken far more, you know, kind of seriously into the program. And so I think this is, you know, in terms of what I would think, you know, the kind of the big learning, if you like, in terms of how resilience, what the evidence is saying in terms of the resilience of the ultra-poor graduation program in the face of such shocks, and what do we learn from this, and, you know, what are the areas we need to be thinking about improving and adapting the program. I will stop, but just another point I want to basically raise, which is, I think I mean, this is coming from, not experimental evidence, but more descriptive policy research that we've been doing on the COVID crisis. And it's extremely clear that the COVID crisis is primarily an urban crisis, right? I mean, it is the face of COVID crisis, the urban one, right? This is where the shocks have hit the highest. This is where the new poverty has been largely created. And yet the ultra-poor graduation model in terms of its urban adaptation needs to be really now taken on in a very, very serious way. And I think that's the other lesson. If you really want to really create greater resilience against this type of shock, we have to, and urban social protection is critical for that. And I think the graduation thinking needs to play a very important role, and along with the social protection, policy actors, in terms of how do we actually adapt this ultra-poor graduation approach in the urban context. And I think that is a very important priority that should be taken. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Imran. And just to follow up, a quick follow up there. I mean, it's come up in the chat, and it was also in the Q&A. People had just, I think, some definitional questions around vulnerability, but also resilience. And so when you were talking about resilience, then you're obviously talking about in terms of resilience to shocks. But I think the point was made in the question that often it's just focusing on this socioeconomic status. And are we also looking at things like access to education and people's mental health and that sort of thing when we're talking about resilience? But yeah, just quickly back to you on just some of the definitional stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's an extremely important point. I think resilience needs to be looked at in that comprehensive way. But I think when I'm talking about resilience, I'm really talking about more economic livelihood, being able to protect against economic livelihood. But I fully agree. We need a more comprehensive approach to looking at resilience. And I think much more importantly, I think we need to invoke the idea of negative, kind of coping behavior, right? Resilience is around how you're coping, and the fact that, what is the cost of that coping mechanism. So I think that's the other dimension that's really, really important, because, if you're being resilient by taking extremely expensive coping mechanism, that actually is depleting, your ability. So I think it's sort of really important to take that into account. But, for my, kind of evidence that I've been looking at is primarily looking at the economic aspects of the resilience.
Yeah, great. Okay, brilliant. Okay, now diving then into the LSE BIG study that looked at the resilience of the 2007 cohort. One of the findings that Rosina spoke about was the ex-participants having to eat into their savings. And I guess I'm curious to get, I guess, Rosina, maybe yours, Imran, and actually anybody else who would like to weigh in, the thoughts on what that might mean for the future. Would we expect, if people are really diving into their savings, would we expect to be seeing maybe people starting to sell some of their productive assets once savings are depleted? Maybe Rosina, if you would like to start off that one.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. And in fact, it's actually good to know, Lisa, that they have the savings to utilize in this crisis. And I hope they have been able to manage this crisis in other ways, utilizing their knowledge, what they have gained from the program. I believe they are continuing to, and they will utilize those knowledge, how to cope up with this critical situation, and also through the diversified income sources. I think that will help them to not selling their assets, rather coping with a different way. And also the research showed that the agricultural sector has a less impact, and as you know that our participants are mostly involved in the agricultural sector, and you can also see that Bangladesh economy is reviving as well, and they are getting involved into the different activities as well. So I think all these factors will help them to cope up with this crisis, rather depleting their assets or doing any harms into their existing upward condition. And maybe Imran Bhai can put more light on this.
Yeah, so I mean, from the PPR-CBIGD survey that we have been doing, and we've been doing 3 rounds of surveys over the last 1 year, and we're starting the 4th round. We're in the midst of it. Actually, we don't see too much of asset sale, right? I mean, asset sale has not been at all really important. There's been saving depletion, but I think there's a gradual recovery of that saving depletion that basically happened. And I mean, I've been kind of discussing with Stuart Rutherford, who has been doing this financial diary project in Wishipara, which is a very small sample, but they do diaries, so they've got real high frequency data in real time. What he's telling me is that actually there is a kind of a very strong recovery of savings that's really happening. So what people did is they depleted savings, but it's very interesting, even when microfinance institutions allowed their members to have access to the savings, actually people did not rush to take on that savings. They use primarily their savings at home as much as possible, and keeping the microfinance savings more for longer term needs and for loan taking purpose and so on and so forth. So I think the financial behavior of poor people are just amazing, and I think extremely resilient. So I think they've taken extremely smart kind of decisions here, and I think some of the actions by microfinance institutions have actually been very clever and smart as well, in terms of providing them with fresh loans, allowing opening up savings, all of that. I think has sort of created a sense of assurance for many poor people, and I think overall financial kind of behavior has been quite robust, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Now, so we can fit in all the questions, we're going to have to move on to how all of this fits with government efforts shortly. But just before we do, if we could maybe get, we had a question in the chat around the health outcomes. And whether we were seeing anything in the long-term evaluation around any health improvements, but also it would be, so that's one thing, if we can talk a little bit about the health outcomes and anything we know there, but also around the finding that the younger people are weathering the crisis better than the old have in, and what does this actually mean in a program and policy sense? And I know that the program did undergo some changes a few years ago, because I think this isn't a brand new finding. But yeah, if we could just maybe, Rosina, maybe you could talk about some of the changes to deal with this, the issue around younger people weathering the shocks better than the older people. And then, yeah, if there was anything that we could say, Imran or Rosina, on the health shocks, and then we can move on to, we'll move on to how this all fits with the government social protection efforts. Okay, over to you.
Okay, so in fact, before the results came from the study, when we were during the implementation of the program, actually we experienced these things from the field, and we were listening to the field that yes, there is a group of people who in the long run actually couldn't gain that much progress compared to the younger people. The investment on this group of people is much higher compared to the return from the investment. And based on these learnings, actually we have gone through a massive redesigning in 2017, where we also tried to focus this issues, what we have experienced from the field. We actually targeted our participants in a better segmented way. We divided them according to their age, like who are the working age populations. They divided into different groups, and we actually customize the program intervention for the oldest people, and we are not calling them as a graduate participants, but after the intervention they will have a better access to the livelihood options. And most importantly for them, we try to address that to facilitate the or link them with the social safety net programs, which is really important for them, and as well as top of the some livelihood activities, so that they can utilize those livelihood enterprises benefits of the enjoy the enterprise benefits from the enterprises, and can have a access of better livelihood options after a certain period of time. So this is how we try to address during the redesign of the program. But as I mentioned several times in my presentation, that the graduation approach is adaptive model. So definitely there is a room for improvement, and we are looking more into these issues, and hopefully we will address this in the coming years in a more structured way. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Imran, was there anything you wanted to add before we'll move on to how this all fits with the government efforts?
I mean, on the sort of health impact.
Yes,
first of all,
definitely.
Obviously takes a comprehensive approach on sort of overall sort of outcomes, but it's a livelihood oriented program, and health outcomes are, of course, sort of important as well as a part of that overall ambition. We have looked at health sort of outcomes, and I don't remember exactly, but I can get back. I think there are domains in which we have had impact, and some domains are puzzling. Some domains are sort of puzzling. I remember child nutrition was one area where I think the progress was not as strong. We did not find as strong impact, and I think there have been some program adaptations with respect to that as well. But I don't want to kind of speak without the kind of proper figures in front of me. But I will we can get back, whoever asked that question, in terms of the overall health impact as well. And there have been several other studies actually on the health side as well, which are not experimental. I remember there was a quasi, our first study of the ultra-poor impact evaluation was a quasi-experimental study that was done in 2002, and I think that data was used to look at whether mothers who were pregnant during the program period, whether and then with the control group, whether that had an impact in terms of fetal health and so ultimate overall the impact on the child. And I think the study found quite strong impact, but it wasn't a kind of experimental evaluation. So I think we need to really look at all of those, and I think it's a very important reminder, perhaps to kind of synthesize some of that evidence on the health side, and then sort of figure out where we are and what we can do to improve.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Okay, well, we're going to turn now to a focus on how this fits with government's efforts on the social protection side. So I'd like to bring in Mr. Shaka now to discuss this linkage. So Mr. Shaka, I mean, you've been working in government in the area of social protection for quite a long time. Can you tell us what your view is on the importance of integrating the graduation approach and its learnings, and we've got a lot of good learnings now, into government programs and policies, especially in those ones that are reaching those programs, the government programs that are reaching the people who are the most marginalized. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for including me in this valuable webinar. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Rosina for her comprehensive and lively and lucid presentation. It was a great learning opportunity for me. I learned a lot. Thank you, Rosina, and I also thank Mr. Imran Mutin for his thoughtful addition to Rosina's presentation as well. Immediately after our independence in 1971, after returning from Pakistan, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, told that this independence will be meaningless if my people do not get enough food to eat if they don't get clothes to wear, if they don't get employment. So this was our the very basic foundation of our constitution, that constitution has taken the responsibility. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure social protection for the people who are lagging behind. So following that constitutional obligation, our government has taken more than 100, to be specific, 123 social protection programs. And out of that, I have counted around 25 programs are in line with graduation model as presented by in today's webinar. It's always better to teach someone how to fish than to give him some fish at one time. So our cash handouts programs are like that, giving fishes one time. But however, there are some cases where we cannot go for graduation approach model with employment and training and all those, because they, for example, old age people, they have lost their cognitive skills. So we can't do our graduation model practices there, because just to keep them alive, just to maintain their vitality, we need extra support and for those people. But the government has taken the steps on life cycle approach, I should say, not approach. I mean, from the very beginning of a child, even before a child was born, government has social protection program for pregnant mothers, and then for lactating mothers, and then at the stage when it comes to working age group, then the graduation model is very much suitable. And we have taken various models. If you allow me, I can mention some projects. First, the project of which I am the national project director, strengthening women's ability for productive new opportunities. I'll discuss in details later, but let me mention some other programs as well. A program for improving the livelihood of transgender, the third gender. They are socially stigmatized. People do not accept them in their ventures. People do not take them as their staff for any employment. They are excluded in the normal social context. That's why government has taken a special program for improving the livelihood of transgender people and others, snake charmers and other disadvantaged communities who are socially excluded. So these people are trained for various trades, for various income generating activities, and they can improve their living conditions. Then comes vulnerable group development. In this program, government provides 30 kilograms of food grain to a particular women of working age from 15 to 49. I repeat, the age is 15 to 49. So they are capable of working, and they are given various trainings on income generating activities. And we have got so many nation building departments at the sub-district level, like women affairs, like youth development, then fisheries, livestock, agriculture. So these departments provides training for vegetable gardening, or maybe for fishing and livestock, cattle rearing, or goat and sheep rearing and all those. So this helps them to increase their income. And poverty has many faces. Those who are poor in terms of income, they are poor in terms of health, because they cannot afford nutritious food. And sometimes providing food support, foods to the people is also a kind of investment, because their consumption level is at the suboptimal level. So they cannot maintain good health, so they cannot work, so they cannot earn enough to invest. So this is the vicious circle of poverty. So as the providing food to this vulnerable group, to this ultra-poor group, sometimes it can be considered as productive consumption. This can be considered as investment as well. So these are the ways, and we have so other programs, employment generation program for the ultra poor, specifically for the ultra poor, then microcredit program for women, and our programs are in many cases gender responsive or gender sensitive, because in a country like Bangladesh, even in a community where people are poor, women are much poorer, because there are some social and religious barriers that in most cases they can't go outside, they cannot avail all the economic opportunities as opposed to their male counterpart. So we need to address all those problems as well. So what I have found in my SHOPNO model, SHOPNO, that is strengthening women's ability for productive new opportunities, strengthening women's ability for productive new opportunities. So in this case, what do we do? Let me tell before the detailed explanation of our activities, let me tell you the recognition of this model. It has been recognized and it has been tested, a successful model in the flagship project of the government, and it was recommended in the National Action Plan of National Social Security Strategy of Bangladesh government, which is prepared by the Cabinet Division and General Economics Division of the Planning Commission of Bangladesh, that it should be replicated in the 200 upojelas. We have got around 500 upojelas. Upojelas means sub-districts. So almost 40% of the area is expected to be covered by this model. Why this model is suggested or recommended? Because it takes a holistic approach of graduation model. It doesn't give only training on income generating activities. At first, the selection process, you will be happy to know that here in this SHOPNO model, only 4% was found as inclusion error, 96% correct compared to other models. And even I'm sorry if I become harsh mentioning the target error of BRAC Ultra-Poor model, targeting ultra-poor model. It was, I think, 20% or so. PPRC study says like that. And the previous program of SHOPNO, that was RIOPA had 13%, more than 13%. But in case of our SHOPNO, it is only 4%. How we achieved such a high case of perfectness in targets in selecting our target people? It is open, and people are after sufficient announcement and publicity, people gather in front of the local government institution who are at the lowest level, where people are known to one another. So there is no question of mistargeting. Only 4% was due to mistakes in age calculation. That means those people are also poor, but they do not fall in the age category. That is from 15 to 49. And then comes our training system. Our training system, we don't train only the income generating activities skill. First of all, we give them training of some life skills. Then comes livelihood skills. At first, life skills, for example, leadership development, how to run a business. And then comes right and entitlement of the poor, gender development, self-learning, and easy accounting, primary healthcare and nutrition, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reductions, basic principles of small business management. All these things, these are common to all income generating activities. They have got a kind of self 5-finger feasibility test. I can tell that feasibility test. Before starting a business, every beneficiary is to ask herself that whether I have the knowledge, I have the skill to run this, to initiate this business. Number 2, is there market in my area? Can I sell my products in this area? Is there sufficient demand? Then comes, is there sufficient capital for me? Can I run the business? Do I have the capital, or can I borrow it from somewhere? Is there potential sources? And then comes, is it profitable? Can I make profit? And even if I can make profit, can I run my family with this profit? And will I have some surplus of this profit so that I can improve my situation in the future? I can reinvest some part of my profit in the coming years. So these are the basic techniques we teach to our beneficiaries, and that's why they become much more confident. And the apron, the pink color apron they wear, it gives them a kind of confidence, because before that they didn't have access, they didn't have courage and confidence to go to a public office. Now they are integrated, they have access to the social distribution system. They can go to the sub-district women affairs office, or livestock office, or fisheries office, or cooperative office, so that they can claim the benefits of credit programs run by them. And we have another important program in Bangladesh, graduation model, that is one house, one farm. This is the brainchild of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Every house is converted into a farm. The poor people in the village, poor people gather together, and mostly the women, and they form an association, and then they start to save, and government gives the same amount of their savings. That means their savings get doubled with the help of government. And after that, they have form a kind of rotating savings and credit association, and by turn they get they get credit from that Rosca association, and this is how they get out from the poverty. But here, sorry.
Oh, sorry, we might have to just maybe just like one more minute, and we'll have to wrap that up. But thank you so much. Yep.
Okay. So what I want to tell is that the government has taken this graduation model seriously, because only giving cash transfer cannot improve the situation in the long run. But there are some people seriously physically challenged, handicapped, and all these people. For them, we will continue our cash transfer programs. But for working age population and some special socially excluded groups like transgender, like snake charmers, and others, we will further strengthen and extend our graduation model approach, and hope that it will ultimately reach our target, poverty-free Bangladesh, and we, as it is in our perspective plan, our vision 2041, will get a developed country in 2041. That is our expectation. Thank you for patient hearing.
Thank you so much, and I love that ending on that aspirational note. So very closely linked to what you were saying there, Mr. Shaka. I have a question for Palash, who you're currently leading the UPG program, but before this you worked with UNDP, and based on your prior experience and the discussion today, I'm getting a bit of feedback. If anybody's not muted, okay, sorry. I'll continue. So based on your prior experience,
Lisa, would you repeat, please? Sometime.
Are you okay? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. All right. So this is a question for Palash. And very linked to what you were saying, Mr. Shaka, around, I mean, there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of things happening in the social protection space in Bangladesh. I think, Palash, you worked with UNDP in Bangladesh on government programs, very aware of the issues around coordination and consolidation. do you have some thoughts of what could be done, I guess, better to better embed the graduation program into the government's suite of social protection programs? Over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you. And thanks, Mr. Two things I'd like to mention here. So when the Bangladesh government was drafting social protection strategy, at the same time, you would see some reflections we had in the 7th 5-year plan, which is basically Bangladesh government's 5-year long-term development plan. And we have also seen that the same also some strong components of social protection has also been reflected in the 8th 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was part of the process in developing both 7th 5-year plan, 8th 5-year plan, as well as social protection strategy. And at the same time, Mr. Sarkar, you mentioned about the RIOPA and the SHOPNO. I was also part of the designing both the programs. Good to see that things are moving.
Are in place.
This is really good. But now the question is, I think it came very sharply from Rosina's presentation, and Dr. Imran Mateen also touched some of the key points there. The first thing is that, the sustainability, the whole question of graduation approach, whether how we are going to integrate that in our existing social protection systems, and as well as the new poor issues, at the same time some other the problems we have been referring to. Without repeating the same things again, what I do is strongly feel that it's important first, in relation to targeting within the social protection. Mr. Sarkar, you have rightly mentioned there are some targeting errors in various programs, but it's really time for all of us to look at the targeting issues, together. And that will basically address not only the inclusion error, but also exclusion error. I mean, these are the two things. Those also are identified by some independent evaluators. Second is that in relation to targeting, one of the key core questions is that the right kind of financing, whether that is happening at the local level or not, whether that is supporting the right kind of social protection safety net programs, which is required for all these extreme poor people and ultra poor people, are those happening or not? And in order to do so, it's so important at the local level to have some joint collaboration and also cooperation at the local level, and which is not at this moment. It's not that it's not moving, but it's not happening as it is expected. So what I'm trying to say is that the first thing we need to do to say the dreams or the objectives and the desires are mentioned in the both 7th 5-year plan, 8th 5-year plan, and national social protection strategy. We have to really take the first step at the local level, focusing on targeting and the right kind of financing. Now, the second point, which is really extremely important, to make all of these investment, all of these asset transfer grants and all sorts of supports, what we are providing through government, through NGOs like BRAC, to all these poor people, it's important to make those assets, transfer of assets, more stronger, one, and make it more productive, expedite the whole the process. And in order to do so, it's so important, and that has been identified again. It's not that I'm saying something new, is that the public sector investment at the local level, that should be also targeting the right kind of poor people. That is not happening. That is to be have a closer look that how we can do it. This is second thing together. Third is that in relation to collaboration, it's so good to see that SHOPNO and Mr. Sarkar, you mentioned about in Bangla, Ekti Bari Ekti Khamar, that kind of programs what governments are running, and perhaps we may need to promote some cross-learning, say like platforms, so that we can learn from each other and like join our hands for some programmatic interventions. So if we do so, what I do think is that the three key agendas what Bangladesh government, perhaps other governments are also doing the same. The three key agendas: first is the poverty reduction, second is a reduction of inequality, addressing inequality, and putting this together, say leading towards an inclusive growth. So if you really want to address all of these three issues as it is mentioned in our National Development Plan and Social Protection Strategy, I think I mean, there is no other option but to join hands. So I'm not repeating some of the areas what already Rosina and Dr. Motin already covered and you covered. I'm just trying to give my perspectives that what we need to do, say in achieve our objectives. Thank you, Lisa. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And actually, I've got so many questions, everybody, and they're all really good questions. And I'm looking at the time, and we're actually already over time. But I really wanted just to at least have a couple of questions in this third area we spoke about having the specific actions that BRAC has taken to deal with COVID. And we've got a number of questions that have come through, but let me just ask a couple, and we might have to wrap up. But I think what we can do too is answer your questions and put them up on socialprotection.org. I'll just make sure that we're able to do that. But let me just ask a couple here. Probably maybe we'll start with Rosina, and then anybody else who might like to weigh in can. The first is around a question around the duration of consumption support, and with COVID happening, did that need to change? Did we need to provide longer consumption support because maybe with lockdowns and markets being impacted? And I guess slightly tangentially related to that was also a question around, did the new poor at this time also receive home visits? So let me just put those ones to you, and then we'll come back and see if we've got time for one more.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for raising this question. Regarding the consumption stipend, what actually we had in our program in the earlier phases, that's we are not continuing in the third phases. But in terms of COVID, yes, they need the cash support for the consumption. So that's why as an emergency cash support we provided to respond this emergency, and that resource is also mobilized from the different stakeholders, as I mentioned in my presentation as well. But the regular consumption stipend that we have seen from our baseline survey and from the what actually due to the macroeconomic changes of the Bangladesh, we also seen that people from Bangladesh is not severely, that food insecurity is not that much severe compared to the earlier stage, like when we started this program. So that's why when we designed the program, consumption stipend is no more in our program. Rather, we focus more on the mass savings so that they can cope up with this kind of shocks. And we also have seen that that's really worse for the people. So but yes, to address the COVID-19, we provided emergency cash support to them. So this is the answers of your first questions. And regarding the new poor, yes, as I have mentioned, that the principles of the livelihood program we tried to intact, so which actually reveals that coaching, the technical, providing the awareness on the technical awareness on the enterprises really helps this group of people to build their confidence. Sometimes it's also completely not matched with their current skill set. So that's why it's also important to provide them technical knowledge. So that's why in the new poor program, yes, we have that option. There is a monthly check-in points on the enterprises as well as the participants' house, where our staffs consult with the participants and also provide the technical knowledge on the enterprises, as well as how to diversify their income and also look at their social aspects too. Hope this answers your questions.
Yep, that was great. All
Okay.
right, so we have one last, I think, again, in light of COVID and normally the program, obviously you're looking at the markets and what sort of assets will do well where. During COVID, can you talk a little bit about whether that was complicated anyway in terms of the market assessments that you had to do and any adjustments in your approach that you had to make, given that with lockdowns and other complicating factors, it wasn't business as usual. Yes, but anything you have to say on that would be very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And in fact, that's the place where adaptation takes place. That's the area. Yes, the market was unstable, and then we also faced challenges to access to markets. So that's why we tried to adapt the alternative, like we communicated with the brokers, local brokers, and we also tried to purchase the assets from the villages. And also we communicated with some traders and actors who actually purchase the assets from online, like during the Eid, you know that we actually sell, people actually purchase the cow for slaughter. So during that time, actually, we communicated with different stakeholders so that online purchase can be done, and also facilitate the market in other way. Definitely, we adopted this.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and as I say, we've got many questions that we haven't been able to ask, and we could be here for another couple of hours, which actually would be quite nice. But what we'll do is just seek to answer those. And thank you so much for people putting in the effort to put up questions, and we will seek to answer those. So I'm going to conclude. So thank you. Thank you again to our speakers, our panelists. Thank you for everybody who has dialed in. It's we've had a very good attendance rate today. Once again, BRAC has shown that it's possible to just keep adapting and improving all the time. You will see on your screen now the reference to SPEC there. You can join SPEC, the Social Protection for Employment community, through socialprotection.org. So please consider being a member and hearing more about all these very interesting issues. So that's it for us today. But there is a very quick post-webinar survey that you'll receive in your browsers as this webinar closes. So we would really appreciate your feedback. So thanks again, everybody. And that's it from us.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.